Greetings, dear friends. We are sincerely glad to greet you again. And today we are going to talk with the esteemed Igor Mikhailovich Danilov.
Hello.
Igor Mikhailovich, at the end of the previous conversation, when you were asked the question of how to gain life, you said simple, but at the same time very significant and very deep words, that one shouldn't serve Satan, but start with a simple thing, just to love each other. And in every video you emphasize this commandment of loving one's neighbor. In practice, it is certainly not easy to follow this commandment. It is not always easy to love one's neighbor. Sometimes we are indignant, angry, and may even hate our neighbors for their deeds, faults, or certain behavior. But then we recall this commandment to love our neighbor, and we try to love them just as zealously, with all our strength. But what is implied by that? We either try to justify our neighbor in some way, or we try to humble ourselves and accept him with all his faults, with all the anger that sometimes comes from this neighbor. And then it is very difficult to love such an individual again. Eventually, this results in a vicious circle from hatred to love and back, which exhausts people very much. So a question arises. Where can we actually find strength to love our neighbor? And why is such a seemingly simple commandment to love one's neighbor so difficult for people to follow?
Everything is very simple. It is much easier for us to love a person who is not close to us because we do not expect anything from him. Whereas with a neighbor, we always compete over who will control whom. In other words, it's a banal struggle for power.
It's true. Our friends said that as soon as they hear from Igor Mikhailovich, love each other, consciousness immediately redirects that to loving someone somewhere, but not those people who are near.
That's right. We perceive those who are near as competitors deeply at the subconscious level, as those with whom we share our own space. Naturally, here there is both confrontation and love, so to say. Therefore, it is really difficult for people to perceive how they can love their neighbor. On the one hand, how can I not love him? He is actually a neighbor. But on the other hand, how can I love him? After all, I will now devote all my love and time to him, while he will manipulate me, or vice versa. Right? This is a natural process. Why does the difficulty arise? First of all, friends, because you are trying to love someone else's consciousness by means of your own consciousness. That's impossible. Our consciousness is unable to love. This is really so. Our consciousness is able to manipulate, to seek its own benefit. And love from consciousness is, first and foremost, a benefit. If there is no benefit, there is no love either. That's how simple everything is. You know, like in business. Meanwhile, from personality, there always comes love and understanding. As some people say, sometimes it is difficult to love even a neighbor if he is not good. But later on, we accept the situation and try to somehow overcome this bad attitude towards him and his anger. We try to love him the way he is and so on. Yet whom are you trying to love, friends? A simple question. The demon in a person, or the person himself. You know, the simplest and the most difficult question is, whom should you love in a person? After all, a human is dual. There's both an angel and a demon in him, right? If you're trying to force the demon in yourself to love another demon, or to love an angel through that demon, that's impossible.
Consciousness often says, if I were in his shoes, I wouldn't do what he did.
This is a frequent question, but friends, there is a simple answer here. If I were in his shoes, I wouldn't do that. Anyone, being in any person's shoes, would do exactly the same thing as that person did. Why? Because you would be in his shoes. My friend, that is, you would be exactly the same, and you would be motivated in exactly the same way by your own consciousness. For the same deed, you condemn. You see how simple everything is.
Igor Mikhailovich, after the video Blessed are the poor in spirit, the most popular question that came from the guys was how to give love. What does it mean to give 100% of love, leaving nothing for oneself? And how to properly give it so that you don't give it to the system, so that it wouldn't be magic? Many people assume that it is certainly not some kind of action in three-dimensionality, that the poor in spirit means that people give away light and love. Is this really the case?
If a person gives away only light and love, then I have a simple question. What about the prophets? Well, indeed, let's take Jesus Christ, and let's take the life of the best of people, the Prophet Muhammad. Did they come, sit, shine, and love? A simple question. Or did they act? How long did Jesus Christ just sit and love, shining at that? Or did he go to people and talk to them? Let's say, most of the time. Right? Or the Prophet Muhammad. Yes, he performed practices, just like Jesus did, but that was his personal time, when he lived for himself and shone for himself. As for the rest of time, when he wasn't doing practices, he devoted it to people. This way, both of them showed that to share love means exactly to live for people and to transmit it to the last drop. Here's the very essence. Why? Because when a person takes love and doesn't give it away, everything stagnates. Let's take a river. After all, everything is repeated fractally, as within, so without. So we take a river. If the river flows, and it flows fast, the water in it is pure, right?
Yes.
But if it has stopped, just turned into a lake, and if this lake doesn't change the water, then this water turns into stagnation and a swamp, right?
Yes, exactly.
So, the love that we share, which doesn't belong to us, this spiritual love belongs to the spiritual world. And when it passes through us, it stimulates us to what? To an action, to an accumulation. Do we try to accumulate it within ourselves? Where? A simple question. In what?
Is there a reservoir where it can be accumulated?
Exactly. And that's where the entire meaning is. The more you give it to people, you pass it on, not in your thoughts, not in fantasies and inactivity, but in real action, in serving people. Because by serving people here, we serve the spiritual world. And the more we receive and the more we give, the purer our waters are. And this is where accumulation manifests itself in the purity of the water that passes through you, and not in its quantity.
Igor Mikhailovich, many people also say, how is it to give 100% of everything to someone? After all, you should also accumulate this love yourself. Consciousness tells you you should take care of yourself a little bit as well, and of your own spiritual salvation.
And here's the key point. Consciousness says, that is, the devil, Satan, teaches a person how to reach the spiritual world. Well, isn't it so? Why? Because we think. We think with the help of our consciousness, by material criteria anyway, don't we? We judge everything, and we perceive everything compared to something else, associatively. Therefore, we also try to put the same labels on spiritual things with the help of consciousness, right?
Kind of physics of three-dimensionality.
Of course. While this is a different physics, these are different processes. The more pure waters pass through us, and the purer those waters are, the more we accumulate it, the more valuable the spiritual world becomes for us, the more valuable the lives of people whom we can really help become. This way we accumulate it. We become a part of the spiritual world, a conductor.
So it's not that you have some, let's say, a
Reserve.
reserve you have filled, and suddenly you need a bigger space. So your energy structure,
And
yes,
every time you need more and more, right? It cannot withstand it.
from such a pyramidal shape, let's
A
say,
pyramidal shape.
it turns into a rhombic one because you have accumulated so much.
Exactly. And later on, you should expand it and add a warehouse.
Yes, exactly.
I see. This relates to the question of why we sometimes become overweight, right? We need to have more space.
Exactly.
Well, if you look from this perspective, just consider Buddha and a lot more, especially the East, all kidding aside. But lamas and spiritual personalities there, all of them suffered from obesity. This is really so. Why? Was it because they required bigger bodies for accumulating spirituality? Well, Jesus Christ didn't suffer from obesity, nor did the Prophet Muhammad, you see? But they had no less love in them than Buddha had.
So, Igor Mikhailovich, attaining love is, first of all, a widening of this silver thread, so to say,
Like the Buddhas.
through which this pure current already flows.
Wait, no, you already speak about spiritual matters. By and large, all jokes aside, yes, this is definitely so.
When a person is distracted,
The closer you are to the spiritual world, the stronger the flow, and the purer Allah is. Naturally, you can pass more of it to people, and it's never enough. When a person is really in the service of God's world, when life truly awakens in him, then no matter how much power the spiritual world gives him, it is never enough for him because there are so many people who are suffering and in need. Sometimes a lot of strength is needed to help those suffering, little angels from the demon's tyranny. Sometimes one really needs a lot of strength to help a person so that he can take a deep breath at least once as a free being without Satan's dictation. At times, this does help a lot of people, but that requires strength.
meaning that power which crushes these barriers from soul to soul.
Of course, this is